Hi, today I'll be sharing my top movies of the year.
Something people would always say, PJ knows how to take a punch. Come on up.
If by any chance you've watched my ranking last year, number 1, it's already outdated. And number 2, I said how 2022 was a great year for movies. However, I think 2023 is actually better than last year. In this video, I'll start with the top 20, which I'll briefly discuss, and then to the top 10. But before we begin, here are some movies that I think would have had a chance to make it to my list but I still haven't watched them. American Fiction, Godzilla Minus One, The Boy and the Heron, The Color Purple, The Iron Claw, and The Zone of Interest. And now the top 20. Starting with Monster. I'm a bit skeptical of movies that use multiple perspectives, but the story itself is great. The only thing you need to know is that you need to be patient with it because it really does take its time, but the ending is very rewarding. The Killer. I got the wrong impression going into this, but it didn't necessarily ruin my experience. One may argue that mostly just hearing his thoughts would ruin the movie's flow, but I found myself compelled and invested, which is what made me like it in the first place. Bottoms. One of the best comedies of the year, and I liked it even more after watching it. Finding out Ayo Edebiri improvised that whole monologue at the beginning just makes me appreciate her and the movie even more. The Holdovers. It's actually very funny and lighthearted, but it's also occasionally sad, which is very typical for a Christmas movie, I guess. I just wish the movie gave more time to make me care about the main character as much as I did for the other two. John Wick Chapter 4. It's the best one in the franchise for me personally, but the action scenes are a bit tiresome for my liking, but if it's choreographed and shot that good, then I really have no right to complain about it. The Missing. This was the Philippines submission for Best International Film if you don't know, and I've seen comparisons to Mysterious Skin, which I haven't seen, but you could tell from the plot alone that it's very similar. I think. It's amazing, emotional, and impactful, and they really utilized the animation aspect of the movie to their strengths. Joyland. It's as beautiful as it's sad. There are these different people who do these things and make you feel unsure as to whether to feel sorry for them or not. The biggest weakness for me was the final act. I feel like they could have put some more depth into a certain character, which I will not name because it's spoilers. Priscilla. This is nothing like last year's Elvis, because it's also absolutely better than Elvis. The soundtrack is quite perfect, especially since this is my first time watching a Sofia Coppola film, and the ending song could not have been any better for me. All of Us Strangers. It's very sad and depressing, but it's also full of love and intimacy at the same time. However, the ending kind of sucked for me, but I have the rest of the movie to make up for it, so I guess it's fine. And number 11, Scrapper. It's a lighthearted and fun movie, but it rightfully takes its time when it does get serious. It also goes by very fast, as sometimes I feel like some of the shorter movies end up being the longest watches. And now let's finally discuss my top 10, starting with
Sing that back to me.
I love a good mockumentary, and on top of that, the humor here is something I'm very fond of. This movie feels like a love letter made by the directors to theater camps and the theater itself, which I'm pretty sure was the point of the movie. And even as someone who's not well versed nor competent in that field, it kind of made me feel like I was a theater kid myself. There are different storylines to follow in this movie, with each character facing their own dilemmas, both related and unrelated to the play they're working on. The passionate directors of the play managing everything, the owner's son who knows nothing about running the camp, the technical director who yearns for something else, and then there's just one who's faking it till she makes it. And even with all of these plot lines, every single one of them got both a justified and satisfying closure, all coming together to conclude the movie on a bittersweet note.
Quick question though, what's a straight play?
There are musicals and then there are straight plays.
So then what would be a gay play?
I guess a musical.
I don't think I've ever been invested in a movie filled with just dialogue as much as I have in Anatomy of a Fall. It's a straightforward movie that centers on a death with an ambiguous cause, all supported by one of the strongest casts of the year. One you'd feel sorry for, one you'd resent, one you would question whether she's innocent or not, one that makes you think if he thinks she's innocent or not, and one that's a dog. I may sound like I'm overreacting here about the dog's performance, but you really do have to see it to believe it. The term power of words could not be any more appropriate for this movie. How they used all talk and almost no background score to create an atmosphere that is so compelling and suspenseful is beyond me. I also appreciate how they kept the consistency of the lead's ambiguity throughout, because making people unsure about the character's morals is harder than you think. A 2.5 courtroom drama, yet somehow it was one of the movies that passed by the fastest while I was watching it, and the best part is I want to watch it again.
Now, looking for a stranger who walks in, kills him while you were sleeping right above and Daniel was out for a walk is a shitty strategy. Samuel had no enemies.
Stop. I did not kill him.
That's not the point. Really.
You must be Gia. Wow, girl, your profile pics do not do you justice. I'm Yas.
Hi, I'm Eric.
He of the low-res cop.
My work precedes me. Jeez.
Thank you. Smells amazing.
Sorry.
Fraulein is definitely my overlooked movie of the year, because whenever people argue that rom-coms don't feel the same nowadays compared to before, I would show them this. Some of the other modern ones fail to meet the standards because they feel either dated or a little too safe and stuck to the formula, but this movie switches it up by adding some elements common in modern filmmaking as well as maintaining a solidified aesthetic with a humorous script, which is what I think should be the direction the genre should be taking from now on. And to think that they pulled all of this off in under 90 minutes, it's very much short and sweet. Like I said earlier, I feel like this movie is overlooked, so for anyone out there interested in watching these movies in my top 10 or 20, I would suggest starting with this. It's just so full of joy and love, the two leads have great chemistry, and I wouldn't have it any other way, truly.
Okay, I'm not even lying, yeah? That is literally my dream date. In fact, if I had a restaurant, I'd call it Nuggets by Candlelight.
If I'm not mistaken, Killers of the Flower Moon is the longest movie that I've ever watched, with a runtime of 3.5 hours. But even after watching it, I could still tell you most of what happened, which is telling of how they did not waste any second of their runtime. This is truly significant because this is a true story that has been chosen to be forgotten but is now here, presented through a compelling yet tragic picture. Events that are not only intended to be retold but also to take a closer look at the evil that caused this all, taken in the human form of greedy white people. What pains me to see after watching this movie is how relevant it is up to this day, with different tribes and groups of people across the world who are forced to suffer at the hands of their oppressors. Of course, none of this would have happened without the production and the subtle yet powerful performances by the cast, especially the three leads. I do wish that we got to see more of Lily Gladstone and her role as Molly Burkhart, and though I understand the intention of the movie, but to see more from her perspective would have made more sense to me, as this should have also been a look into her and the Osage tribe in general, and not just the several crimes committed towards them. I've been talking a bit longer than usual for this, but I really just wanted to take my time to air out my thoughts, and I'm really just looking forward to seeing this again.
You know, you got nice color scheme. What color would you say that is?
My color.
Honestly. I don't think we have enough hot dogs.
I find May December to be one of, if not the most disturbing and uncomfortable movie of the year. Not only does it tackle an extremely sensitive topic, but it also takes you in a closer look at each character, revealing something more about themselves and how it affects everyone and everything around them as the story progresses. Something devastating, something appalling, something inhumane. The entire thing just feels like a vase that's ready to crack at any time, and once it does, everything changes. Everyone, particularly Julianne Moore's character Gracie, attempts to conceal the truth, even when they know for a fact that it's inevitable that it will come back to confront them, to confront her. I find Moore, Natalie Portman, and Charles Melton to be incredible in this, and I think this is some of their best performances yet, especially Natalie, with a monologue that will stick with you even after watching it. And not only that, but this may be my favorite ending of the year, just for how surprised I was about it. I may not have had a guess going into this, but if I had one, it's probably not close either way.
Yeah. I already have an idea of what it must have felt like.
What felt like?
I was sneaking around with you. I shouldn't have said that.
I'm a changeable feast, as are all of we. Apparently, according to Emerson, disagreed with by Harry.
Come, just come.
You were in my son.
What?
If we're talking about unique films of the year, this would be on top of my list. Poor Things, even though it's an adaptation of a book, feels very original and fresh, as it's an outstanding and a very out-there picture. The colorful world building, the stacks of jokes, the occasional grotesque, and the committed performances from the cast. It is a journey of exploration and self-discovery, understanding what it is to live freely, what it is to live without prejudices, and what it is to be human and alive. We follow Bella across her journey and watch as she discovers the meaning of life through concepts like philosophy, socialism, and hierarchies. And not only Bella, but the movie as well. The frames transitioning from black and white to color, the score going from snippets of sounds to fully formed music. It just feels like a complete movie from start to finish. Safe to say, this isn't gonna be for everyone due to some scenes being explicit and gory, but just the entirety of this movie is satisfying to watch, and you could just feel how much heart and passion the movie has.
I find myself merely jealous of the men's time with you, rather than any moral aspersion against you. It is your body, Bella Baxter, yours to give freely.
I generally charged 30 francs.
Well, that seems low.
Criticality, a point of no return, massive explosive force. But this time, the chain reaction doesn't stop.
It would ignite the atmosphere.
How does one explain the feeling of watching Oppenheimer? I'm gonna be honest, it took me a second watching for me to actually appreciate this movie. The first time around was me adjusting to the 3-hour movie mindset, especially since this is only the second time I'm watching a 3-hour movie in theaters. An extremely different experience from a laptop. It was only after watching it that it came around to me, and the rewatching only solidified it. This is a detailed and sophisticated look into the creation of the atomic bomb and the circumstances that came after it. The movie is technically the usual biopic, but with the direction and that Christopher Nolan thing that Christopher Nolan does, it was able to stand out and transform into a picture that is mesmerizing as it is terrifying. I'll admit that I find the middle segment weaker than the first, only for it to pick up with the best third of the movie, from the Trinity test all the way to the end. Performances like Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt are just some of the many strengths this movie has, along with my all-time favorite score and visual effects, and that says a lot. Do I think this is going to win Best Picture? I honestly don't know. I think it's between this and Killers of the Flower Moon, but I get it. I see the vision if it does.
Even though you brought quantum physics to America, which made me curious.
What have you found out?
You're a dilettante, a womanizer, a suspected communist.
I'm a New Deal Democrat.
I said suspected.
Barbie, wake up.
Hey. I'm like you now. Ugly and unwanted.
Thanks.
This is the best part to remind you that preferences in movies are subjective. I had doubts if I placed it too high, yes, but whenever I revisited clips of it, I find myself just watching the next 10 minutes or even more than that. Barbie is just pure fun, and on top of that, it actually does have substance. It takes its time to balance out both the humor and the gravity of the topics it tackles. And besides entertainment, it is also a medium for people to understand, or even introduced for some, the concepts of feminism, toxic masculinity, maternal relationships, and even the meaning of life itself. And it's even questioned by the movie's central song itself. What are we even made for? I can guarantee that this is still a flawed movie. I see its problems and all, but isn't that the case for all? A movie that gets some of my biggest laughs and biggest cries deserves a clearly high spot in my favorites of the year, and I think it's as simple as that.
What am I supposed to do?
Ken, go for a walk or something.
By myself?
Yes.
Really? Where?
Anywhere.
Can I go that way?
Yes. Okay.
Drop what you're doing and stop Spider-Man. Miles Morales. He's entering Sector 4.
After watching this movie, the first thing that came to my mind was, how do you even come up with something like this? An overwhelming and show-stopping experience. The first Spider-Verse movie was already good as it is, and to follow that one up seemed like a difficult job to do at first, but somehow they actually managed to do it. Sure, maybe being a part 1 hinders it from unleashing its full potential, but that doesn't change the fact that Across the Spider-Verse has taken animation to greater heights this year, and will hopefully be a continuing sign that animation gets more recognition in the following years. You have these different universes with different animation styles and different characters and different scorings, up to the littlest of details. The setup for the second part is perfectly created, the stakes in the antagonist's threats have been elevated, the character developments are present, and they still manage to maintain their wittiness and personalities despite all of that. Truly an accomplishment the people behind this should be very proud of. And I'm personally hoping that part 2 gets delayed, if it's still not, but whenever it's gonna be released, I will be there.
She's a tough grader. And a B in Spanish.
What? Woo, okay.
Miles,
Are you trying to kill your mother?
Cálmate, mami. Eso no es my fault.
¿Qué es eso que esto no es my fault? Tú estás tomando una clase en Spanglish.
No, I just missed a few classes.
Oh, just a few classes. Well, what's a few?
I mean, you know, like...
Hands on.
In the last 2 years, my top 1 movie was something very eye-popping or something light-hearted. So me seeing Past Lives and the think pieces that came after it surprised me because I immediately knew that this would be my number 1 of the year. The simplest of stories could make the most profound messages. The idea of a past life is used in 2 ways here. One as a literal meaning along with the lines of reincarnation, and another as a description of Nora and Hesong's childhood. Seeing your past life flash before your eyes, looking back at what is like and what it would have been like, but at the same time reminding yourself of the present, your actual life, and what would happen in the future if you fail to prevent these 2 timelines from clashing. Even concepts like language and time play sort of a role in this movie. There's Arthur and Hesong, who begins to lose connection with Nora whenever she interacts with the other, in a language unfamiliar to them. And then there's Arthur and Nora, who do love each other, but could feel the past coming back to them, slowly pulling them apart. And then there's Nora and Hesong, trying to reach out and connect literally and figuratively across continents throughout these past months and years before finally reuniting once more. Past Lives may sound like a typical what-if movie, but the way it was executed and directed is what makes it stand out above the rest. Especially coming from someone's directorial debut, that's not fair. It built up all of my emotions in this movie just for them to break it down. A resolution that made me feel like my heart actually sank. Which is a very good remark from me, but I wish they didn't have to do that because I do not enjoy that feeling.
안녕하세요. 만나서 반가워요.
Hi, nice to meet you, Asa.
This is where I finally conclude my favorites of the year. It's a little longer than I expected it to be, but I really did just want to speak my thoughts out for this. Like I said earlier, 2023 has been amazing and it really does have so many standouts in both good and bad ways. I hope this 2024 is also as good as this year, and I'm a bit concerned because the bar is really high this time, but we can only hope. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you sometime, I don't know,